Hi, welcome back. Our previous lesson was on price elasticity of demand. Today we'll be looking at the determinant of price elasticity of demand. From our previous lesson, we defined price elasticity of demand as the measure of how responsive quantity demanded is to changes in price. That is, how much quantity demand will increase or decrease when price were to change. Now let's look at the determinant of price elasticity. The first determinant of price elasticity is availability of substitutes. Now substitutes are goods that are used in place of each other, for instance, coffee and tea. If you were to increase your demand for one, then it means you decrease your demand for the other good. So when a good has many substitutes, it means consumers have variety or lot of options. So when the price of one of the good increases, they can switch to the other good. For instance, when the price of tea increases, consumers can easily switch to buy coffee. So when the good has lots of substitutes, it gives consumers a lot of options. So their quantity demand is very responsive to changes in prices. When the price of that good increases, they will switch to buy the alternative good, which will make their demand more elastic. The second determinant of price elasticity of demand is brand goods versus category of goods. Now, specific brands tends to have more elastic demand than categories of goods. So when you talk about a brand of good, which is maybe a brand of cereal, which could be Weetabix or Cheerios or Cornflakes, the demand for those are more elastic than when you talk about the category of cereal, like the entire cereal category as a whole. So it's easier to find a substitute for a particular kind of cereal than to find a substitute for the whole cereal as a category of good. When you consider the category of cereal as a whole, demand is more inelastic. This means that consumers will be less responsive to an increase in price of cereal as a whole, because this will mean they'll have to switch to alternative breakfasts such as toast or yogurt. However, when you consider brands of cereal, demand will be more elastic. Consumers can easily switch to cornflakes when the price of Weetabix increases. So when you are looking at a category of good as a whole, demand is more inelastic. But when you dissect it and look at brand of that category of good, demand will become more elastic. The third factor that determines demand is whether the good is a necessity. So necessities are goods that you really cannot do without, and their demand is more inelastic. Now, example of necessities are food and water. These are goods that you cannot live without them. So when the price of those goods increases, even though you might decrease the quantity demand, you will not decrease it drastically because you still need those goods to survive. So when a good is a necessity, the demand becomes less elastic or inelastic, because we cannot do without the consumption of those goods. So we will have to buy them anyways when their price increases. Now, the fourth factor that determines price elasticity is consumer search. Consumer search makes demand more elastic. When consumers are willing to search a lot for a low-cost alternative for something, demand for that product is more elastic. But the more you search for a good deal, the more likely you are to find an acceptable lower price substitute. When consumers are willing or able to search for alternatives of a good, that good becomes more elastic, because that means that they have time to search for a substitute or a low cost or a more affordable option as compared to what they have to buy. But when consumers are limited or they are not willing to search for alternatives, then they don't have a choice but to buy the good that they have. So that will make their demand inelastic. Now, the next factor that determines price elasticity of demand is how important that good is with regards to your household or individual budget. Now, a change in the price of a good or service affects the purchasing power of a consumer's income, and that affects the amount of a good that a consumer will buy. If a good takes a big chunk of your budget, when the price of that good increases, you might buy less of it or drastically less of it because it affects your budget hugely. But when the good does not really affect your budget, in this case, let's say the price of the good is negligible or very small, when the price increases, it won't increase that much to affect your budget that drastically, so your quantity demand might not change that much. Let's look at two examples: jeans versus pencil. Your demand for jeans will be more elastic as compared to your demand for pencil. This is because jeans is much more expensive than pencils. When the price of jeans were to increase from, let's say, £20 to £30, that's a big increase, and that can affect your budget drastically. So your demand will be more elastic. So you might decrease your demand drastically for jeans. But when the price of pencil were to increase from maybe 50p to 70p, the price is still quite low as compared to the price of jeans. So you might end up buying still buy more pencils even though the price has increased, or you decrease your demand, but it won't be as much as your decrease in demand for jeans. So when a good takes up a lot of your budget, your demand becomes more elastic, and when a good takes up little of your budget, your demand becomes more inelastic. Now, the final factor that affects price elasticity of demand is demand gets more elastic over time. On any day, many of your decisions about what you want to purchase are difficult to change. But if you give yourself enough time, you might be able to change the decisions that you make. So if you're considering what we call in economics short-term and long-term, a short-term can be any period. For example, let's say in this case, a short term is maybe 1 day. In 1 day, it's difficult to change decisions or to even find substitutes for a good or to find low cost options. Maybe you have to make an urgent purchase in a day. You can't really adjust your demand that much, so you are still bound to buy the good even if the price were to increase. But if you had 1 year to make that purchase, then you can search elsewhere for substitutes or cheaper options. So a good becomes more elastic over time because you have enough time to search for other options or to search for low cost options or substitute for that good. But it's much more difficult to change your decision in a shorter period of time, which will make your demand inelastic. So this is all that we have for our lesson on the determinant of price elasticity of demand. Our next lesson, we'll be looking at revenue and demand elasticity. If you enjoyed today's lesson, consider subscribing. Thank you.